He turned on the driver app to test a cruel suspicion. Ricardo Mendez stared at the computer screen in his office on the 20th floor of a commercial high-rise in downtown Los Angeles. The bank transfer was right there, undeniable. $2,800,000 withdrawn from the joint account that Thursday morning with no explanation at all. The passenger who got into the car was his own wife. What she confessed over the next 47 minutes destroyed 15 years of marriage and saved both their lives. Ricardo ran a hand through his graying hair, trying to make sense of it. Juliana had never done anything like this. In 15 years together, she always checked with him about any expense over $1,000. Now, almost $3 million had vanished into thin air. Mendez Construction's office took up half the floor. Through the glass walls, Ricardo could see his 200 employees working, oblivious to the personal earthquake happening in the boss's office. He minimized the bank window and opened Juliana's call history on the family's synced system. Dozens of calls to unknown numbers in recent weeks. Mysterious outings. Meetings that didn't exist on her architect's calendar. "Mr. Mendez, your 3 o'clock is here." Patricia's voice, his secretary, came through the intercom. "Cancel everything today, Patricia. Family emergency." Ricardo stood, the decision already made. His marriage might be collapsing, but he needed the truth. He grabbed the keys to the Mercedes he used occasionally, the backup phone he kept in the drawer, and walked to the elevator. Reflected in the steel doors, he saw a 42-year-old man, successful, who had built an empire from nothing alongside the woman who might now be betraying him. The underground parking garage was almost empty at that hour of the afternoon. Ricardo walked to the black Mercedes E-Class he kept as a spare car. It was an executive model perfectly suited for Uber Black, the app's premium category. He'd created a driver account weeks earlier when the first suspicions began, but had never had the courage to use it. Inside the car, the AC fought the heat of November. Ricardo took off the Italian blazer, loosened the silk tie, and began the transformation. From the glove box, he grabbed a plain black cap, generic sunglasses, and a basic jacket he'd bought at a department store. Each piece was a disguise against his identity as a successful businessman. The hardest moment was taking off his wedding ring. The white gold band with tiny diamonds had been Juliana's choice when they still lived in a 2-bedroom place on the east side. "One day we'll trade up for nicer rings," she had said. They never did. Those rings represented the time when they were poor but undeniably happy. Ricardo set the ring in the center console and looked at himself in the rearview mirror. With the cap covering his gray hair and the sunglasses hiding part of his face, he could pass for any rideshare driver. He powered up the backup phone and opened the Uber app. His hands trembled slightly as he switched to driver mode. "First ride available," he muttered to himself, setting the app to accept only trips near Juliana's office in Beverly Hills. As he drove that way, memories of the last few weeks bombarded his mind. Juliana coming home late, always with excuses about urgent projects, the different perfume, calls she answered in the bathroom, the irritation whenever he asked about her day. Every cliché of an affair was there, but Ricardo refused to believe it. Not Juliana. Not after everything they had built together. The Mercedes stopped at a strategic spot 2 blocks from the architecture firm where Juliana was a partner. From there, Ricardo could see the entrance of the mirrored building without being noticed. As he waited, his mind drifted back to the beginning of it all. 15 years earlier, they were just 2 indebted dreamers. Ricardo, a construction worker who picked up side jobs as an electrician. Juliana, freshly graduated in architecture, no clients, no prospects. They rented an apartment where the air conditioning was an old fan and dinner was often instant ramen with an egg. "We'll make it, Ricky," Juliana would say, using the pet name only she used. "You build, I design. We're going to take over this city." And they did. The first small contract became 2, then 10. Ricardo formalized a construction company. Juliana opened her own office. They worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. When Caio was born 12 years ago, they had already moved to a better apartment. When Marina came 3 years later, they were living in a house in Bel Air. But something had changed in recent months. Juliana, always transparent as crystal clear water, had turned evasive. Sex, once frequent and passionate, had become rare and mechanical. Conversations about the future stopped. She stopped calling him Ricky. The phone buzzed. A ride request popped up on the screen. The pickup point was Juliana's office. The destination, an address in Calabasas that Ricardo didn't recognize. The passenger's name made his heart stop for a second. Juliana M. Ricardo glanced at the clock. 5:05 p.m. Juliana usually didn't leave until 7. Why was she leaving early? To meet whom? His sweaty hands almost dropped the phone as he accepted the ride. In 3 minutes, he would know if his marriage could be saved or if 15 years of love were about to turn to ashes. Ricardo drove the 200 meters to the building's entrance as if they were miles. Every second dragged. The cap seemed to squeeze his head. The sunglasses necessary against the late afternoon sun felt suffocating. He stopped the Mercedes exactly where the GPS indicated. Through the tinted glass, he saw the elegant lobby of the commercial building. Beige marble, tropical plants, uniformed security guards. How many times had he picked Juliana up there for romantic lunches? How many times had they kissed in that same place where he now waited, disguised as a stranger? The app showed the passenger was on her way. Ricardo adjusted the rear-view mirror to get a clear view of the entrance. His heart pounded so hard he feared it could be heard. "Easy," he told himself. "This could all be a misunderstanding. It could be—" The glass door opened. Juliana appeared, and Ricardo had to stifle a gasp. Even after 15 years, she still took his breath away. Brown hair pinned in an elegant bun, a navy dress he didn't recognize, high heels she wore only for special occasions. She looked at her phone as she walked, typing frantically. Ricardo watched as she stopped a few feet from the car, still focused on the screen. She was responding to messages, but he couldn't see to whom. Juliana lifted her eyes, spotted the Mercedes, and walked with purpose. Ricardo pulled the cap lower, adjusted the sunglasses, and steeled himself for the hardest moment of his life. When she opened the rear door, a familiar perfume filled the car. It wasn't the different fragrance he'd noticed in recent weeks. It was hers, the same one as always, the one he'd given her on their last anniversary. "Good afternoon," Juliana said as she got in without looking up from her phone. Her voice, usually sweet and melodious, was tense, tired. "Good afternoon," Ricardo replied, deliberately deepening his voice and keeping his back turned, confirming the destination. 340 Flower Avenue, Calabasas? That's right. She finally put the phone in her purse and settled into the leather seat. "Please take the fastest route. I have an important appointment." Ricardo started the car and began to drive, fighting every instinct screaming at him to turn around and confront her right then. In the rear view, he watched her every move. Juliana looked out the window, lost in thought, occasionally sighing. "First time going to this address?" he asked, trying to sound casual like any driver would. No. I mean, yes. To this specific address, yes. The answer came out tangled, nervous. Ricardo felt his stomach flip. She was lying. In 15 years of marriage, he knew every nervous tick she had, the way she touched her right ear when she lied. Exactly what she was doing now. Traffic's rough today, he commented, merging onto the 405. Do you live around here in Beverly Hills? I work here. The answer was curt, as if she didn't want to talk. Then, surprisingly, she continued. I live in Bel Air, but it's complicated. Complicated. The word floated in the air like an unintentional confession. What was complicated? Their marriage? The double life she might be leading? Silence settled in the car. Juliana grabbed her phone again, and Ricardo saw in the mirror when a message lit up the screen. She typed quickly. I'm on my way. 40 minutes. Who was she going to? Who was waiting for her in Calabasas? The Mercedes cruised along the freeway as the sun began to set over Los Angeles. The glass-clad buildings reflected shades of gold and red. It was a late afternoon far too beautiful for what might be the end of a marriage. Excuse me, Juliana said suddenly. Do you mind if I make a call? Go right ahead, Ricardo answered, his heart accelerating. She dialed. 3 rings before someone picked up. Hi, it's me, Juliana said, her voice suddenly softer. Yes, I'm on my way. No, he doesn't know anything. Yes, I'm sure. It's all set. Don't worry, it's going to be fine. Me too. See you soon. Ricardo gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. He doesn't know anything. He was the clueless husband. Rage began to boil in his chest, mixed with a pain he had never felt before. The 405 crawled with the typical late afternoon slowdown, and Ricardo was silently grateful for every red light, every jam that stretched out this agonizing revelation. Juliana had finished the mysterious call and was now nervously rummaging through her purse, searching for something. The silence in the car was dense, broken only by the muffled sound of other vehicles and the soft hum of the Mercedes air conditioning. Sorry to ask, Ricardo said, keeping the casual tone of any driver, but you look worried. Rough day at work? It was risky to make small talk, but he needed to hear more, needed to understand what was happening with the woman who had shared his bed for 15 years. Juliana looked up, surprised by the question. In the rear view, Ricardo saw her hesitate, as if deciding whether to open her heart to a stranger. You have no idea, she finally answered, her voice heavy with a fatigue he hadn't noticed before. You know when you're carrying the world on your back and can't tell anyone? The irony of the situation wasn't lost on Ricardo. There was his wife, venting to a supposed stranger about secrets she wouldn't share with her own husband. Sometimes it helps to talk to someone you'll never see again, he offered, surprising himself with how calm he sounded, playing the part of the understanding stranger. Juliana laughed, but without joy, bitter. Funny you say that. My husband always tells me the same thing, that I should open up more, trust people more. But there are things that... She stopped, biting her lower lip the way she always did right before she cried. Ricardo knew that gesture. How many times had he comforted her when she did exactly that? Her phone buzzed again. Juliana glanced at the message and her face tightened even more. My God, it's already 5:30. We need to get there before 6:30. It's really important. She leaned forward, as if that would make the car move faster through traffic. I'll do my best, ma'am, Ricardo replied, changing lanes when an opening appeared. This appointment in Calabasas, work-related? It was a bold question, but he needed to know. No. Yes, it's complicated, Juliana answered, touching her right ear again. It's a family situation I'm handling. My husband can't know. He wouldn't understand. Each word was a knife in Ricardo's chest, but he forced himself to keep driving to maintain the charade. Traffic finally began to flow better as they transitioned onto the 101. Juliana had relaxed a little in the back seat, seemingly more comfortable with the steady speed. In the rear view, Ricardo noticed she'd slipped off her high heels and was massaging her feet, an intimate gesture she only made when she was very tired or stressed. You know, she began out of nowhere, as if continuing a conversation that existed only in her head. People think money solves everything. My husband, for example, built an empire, a construction company with 200 employees. We have a beautiful house in Bel Air, imported cars, the kids go to the best schools. But money doesn't buy health, it doesn't buy time, it doesn't buy... She stopped, swallowing the words. Ricardo's heart sped up. What was she talking about? What health problem? He wanted to shout, to reveal himself right there, to demand answers, but he held back. He needed to hear more, needed to fully understand before he acted. Forgive me for intruding, he said carefully, but it sounds like you're going through something very hard. Sometimes we have to make tough decisions to protect the people we love, right? Juliana stayed silent so long that Ricardo thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight with restrained emotion. You have no idea how much. 3 months ago, I found out something that could destroy my family. And I'm doing everything I can to fix it without my husband finding out. He's a proud man, you know? Built everything from scratch, always the provider, the strong one, the fixer. If he finds out that... She stopped again, wiping away a tear that escaped. That he couldn't fix this one. Ricardo finished, his voice almost breaking. It was strange to talk about himself in the third person. Stranger still to hear his wife describe him that way. Exactly, Juliana confirmed. Ricardo is the most stubborn, proud man I know. He's also the most generous, the hardest worker, the best father our kids could have. But there are certain things he wouldn't accept, certain truths that would destroy him. And I'd rather have him hate me thinking I cheated than let him discover the truth. Juliana's words hung in the car like a bomb about to go off. Ricardo had to summon all his willpower not to pull over right there on the freeway and demand explanations. Cheating? She'd rather have him believe she was cheating? What could be worse than that? $2,800,000, Juliana went on as if talking to herself. That's what I had to take from our joint account today. Ricardo will find out, of course. He always reviews the accounts. He'll think I'm siphoning money, that I have a lover. I don't know. And maybe that's for the best. Ricardo nearly lost control of the car. So that was it. She just confirmed the exact amount. But for what? For whom? He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, grateful for the sunglasses hiding his tearful eyes. That's a lot of money, he managed, his voice hoarse. Must be something very serious for you to risk your marriage like that. You have no idea, Juliana said, and now the tears were falling freely. She made no effort to hide them. After all, what did it matter to cry in front of an Uber driver she'd never see again? 3 months ago, I got a call. It was about my husband's father, Mr. Arnaldo, a wonderful man, you know? He raised Ricardo alone after his mother died, worked 3 jobs to pay for his schooling, never let him go without even when they barely had anything to eat. Ricardo felt the world tilt. His father? What had happened to his father? He'd spoken to Arnaldo last week. The old man had said everything was fine, just a stubborn cold. Mr. Arnaldo is sick, Juliana continued, unaware of the emotional earthquake she was causing in the driver. Very sick. Advanced stage pancreatic cancer. Doctors here in the States gave him 3 months to live, tops. But there's an experimental treatment in Houston. It's insanely expensive. No guarantee it'll work, but it's the only chance. The Mercedes kept gliding along the freeway as the sun sank toward the horizon, washing the sky in shades of orange and purple. Ricardo drove on autopilot, his brain trying to process the avalanche of information. His father was dying. His wife had known for 3 months, and she'd kept it from him. "But why not tell your husband?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice neutral. "If his father is sick, he has the right to know, to help." Juliana let out a bitter laugh. "You don't know Mr. Arnaldo. He made me swear to keep it secret. Said he'd rather die than be a burden to his son. Said Ricardo had already done enough, kept every promise, given him wonderful grandkids, a comfortable life. Let the boy be, Jew. That's what he told me. I've lived enough. I'm happy enough. I don't want him to see me wasting away. I don't want him spending the grandkids' money on me." Ricardo had to wipe away the tears sliding beneath his sunglasses. That was exactly the kind of thing his father would say. Arnaldo had always been too proud, always sacrificing for others, never accepting help from anyone. "So, you decided to help on your own," he said, more a statement than a question. "What else could I do?" Juliana replied, desperation in her voice. "Let the man, who was a father to me, too, die without trying. He treated me like a daughter from the moment Ricardo introduced us. When our son Caio was born premature and we spent 3 months in the hospital, it was Mr. Arnaldo who slept there every night so Ricardo and I could rest. When Marina had meningitis at 2, he sold the only thing he owned, an old family watch, to help pay for her treatment." Each revelation clicked into place, like a puzzle piece forming a picture Ricardo could never have imagined. His wife wasn't having an affair. She was trying to save his father. The GPS said 15 minutes to the destination. Juliana had stopped crying and was now staring out the window, lost in thought. Ricardo seized the quiet to try to reorder his own thoughts. Now it all made sense. The mysterious outings were to take his father to appointments. The hidden calls were with hospitals and clinics. The different perfume was probably the lingering smell of disinfectant on her clothes. Juliana's phone rang, breaking the silence. She answered quickly. "Hello? Yes, I'm on my way. Yes, I brought all the paperwork. The wire went out this morning. No, he still doesn't know. Please, doctor, you promised you'd try. I know there are no guarantees, but it's the only hope. Yes, we'll be there in 15 minutes. Is Mr. Arnaldo already there? How is he? Okay, see you soon." When she hung up, Juliana was crying again. "I'm sorry," she said to Ricardo. "You must think I'm crazy, crying and spilling my life to a stranger." "I don't think that at all," Ricardo answered honestly. "I think you're one of the bravest people I've ever met. Carrying a weight like that alone, protecting your husband and your father-in-law at the same time, can't be easy." "It isn't," Juliana admitted. "Every night I lie down next to Ricardo and want to tell him everything. I want to share this weight with him, cry on his shoulder, ask for help. But then I remember Mr. Arnaldo begging me, with tears in his eyes, not to tell his son. Promise me, Jew, he said. Promise my boy will remember me strong, working, playing with the grandkids. I don't want his last memory to be me wasting away in a hospital bed." Ricardo had to fight not to sob. He knew his father's stubbornness too well, the pride that was both his greatest strength and his greatest flaw. How many times had they argued because of it? How many times had Ricardo begged his father to accept help, to accept gifts, anything to make his life easier? "And this treatment in Houston?" he asked. "Do you think it can work?" "The doctors say there's a 30% chance," Juliana replied. "It isn't much, but it's more than zero. The treatment costs $500,000 plus travel, lodging, everything. That's why the $2.8 million. I wired it all this morning before the cutoff." She paused, looking out the window as the first homes of Calabasas came into view. "The worst part is, I know Ricardo will never forgive me. When he finds out I hid his father's illness, that I made decisions about Mr. Arnaldo's life without consulting him, he'll hate me. And maybe it's better that he hates me thinking I cheated with another man than that he knows I betrayed him with the truth." The GPS announced they were 5 minutes from the destination when Ricardo made the decision that would change everything. His hand trembled as he flipped on the hazard lights and began to slow, looking for a safe place to pull over. There was a gas station up ahead with a wide, well-lit turnout. Juliana looked up from her phone, confused by the change in route. "What happened? Is there a problem with the car?" she asked, worry clear in her voice. It was already 6:15 and she knew Mr. Arnaldo was waiting at the clinic in Calabasas, probably anxious and alone. Ricardo didn't answer right away. He pulled the Mercedes into a spot away from the pumps, turned off the engine, and sat in silence for a few seconds that felt endless. His hand still gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. Then slowly, deliberately, he began to remove the disguise. First the sunglasses, then the cap. "Sir, what are you doing?" "I need to get to the clinic, it's urgent," Juliana said, her voice climbing an octave with anxiety. But when Ricardo turned in his seat, when his eyes finally met hers with nothing between them, the world stopped. Juliana's face went through a complete transformation in seconds. First confusion, her eyes widening in disbelief, then shock, her hand flying to cover her mouth in pure horror. And finally, absolute panic, tears springing up instantly as she frantically searched for the door handle. "Juliana, wait!" Ricardo said, his voice shattering into 1,000 pieces. He slipped out of the front seat and came around the car, reaching the rear door before she could open it all the way. "Please listen to me." "My God, Ricardo! My God!" she repeated, sobbing uncontrollably. Her whole body shook as if with a high fever. "You heard everything. You know everything. I ruined everything. I ruined everything." Ricardo opened the door and, without thinking twice, slid into the back seat, pulling Juliana into his arms. She resisted for a moment, her fists beating weakly against his chest, and then collapsed completely, crying with an intensity he had never witnessed in 15 years of marriage. He held her tightly, his own tears falling silently as he stroked her hair, murmuring words of comfort he could barely process himself. It took several minutes before Juliana calmed enough to speak. They stayed wrapped around each other in the back seat of the Mercedes, the world outside going about its business while inside the car, 2 lives were being completely rewritten. Ricardo was the first to break the silence, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Why, Ju? Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, using the pet name she used for him, reversing roles in a desperate attempt to connect. "My father is dying, and you thought I didn't have the right to know?" Juliana pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, her face streaked with tears and smeared makeup. "He made me swear, Ricardo. Your father made me swear on our kids' lives that I wouldn't tell. You know how stubborn he is. You know how he hates being a burden to anyone, especially to you. But 3 months, Juliana. 3 months you carried this alone, Ricardo said, his voice breaking again. You took him to doctors, ran tests, arranged treatment, and I was thinking you were... He couldn't finish. That I was cheating on you, Juliana supplied, another wave of tears spilling over. I know how it looked. The mysterious outings, the hidden calls, the money gone. Part of me wanted you to think that, because it would be easier than you finding out I betrayed your trust by hiding something so important. Ricardo cradled her face in his hands, forcing her to keep eye contact. You didn't betray me, Ju. You tried to protect everyone. You tried to carry the world on your shoulders alone. But why treatment in Houston? Why spend our money without talking to me? Because your father found out that I knew, Juliana explained, taking his hands. 2 weeks ago, he confronted me. He said that if I told you, he would kill himself. Ricardo, he said, he would take his own life rather than be a burden, rather than have you spend the grandkids' money on a treatment that might not even work. He meant it. I saw it in his eyes. So I made a deal. I'd cover the treatment with my money without you knowing, and he'd agree to try. Your money? Ricardo asked, confused. But you took it from our joint account, which is also mine, Juliana reminded him gently. Half of everything we built is mine, legally and morally. I worked just as hard as you to get us here, but I knew you'd notice. I knew you'd find out. I just needed enough time to get your father to Houston to start the treatment. After that, when you found out, I'd deal with the consequences. Ricardo pulled her into another hug, tighter this time. And you'd rather have me hate you thinking you had a lover than know the truth about my dad. My God, Juliana, what kind of husband am I that you thought you couldn't count on me? Juliana eased back again, this time gripping his hands firmly, her brown eyes shining with a determination he knew well. It was the same look she'd had when she decided to open her architecture office, when she decided to have their second child despite their finances back then, when she made any major decision in their lives. You're a wonderful husband, Ricardo. That's exactly why I didn't tell you, she said, her voice gaining strength. You would have confronted your father. You would have fought him, forced him to accept treatment, and he would have died hating himself for being a burden, hating you for taking from him the last thing he has, his pride. You know it's true. You're both too stubborn, too proud, and you love each other too much to watch the other suffer. Ricardo knew she was right. There would have been fights, arguments, words said in the heat of the moment that could never be taken back. His relationship with his father had always been intense, full of love, but also conflict over independence and pride. So you sacrificed yourself to protect us both, he said, in awe of the woman before him. I love you too more than my own life, Juliana said simply. But now that you know, what are we going to do? Your father is waiting at the clinic. The flight to Houston is the day after tomorrow. Everything's ready. If you show up there now, if you confront him, he might back out of everything. Ricardo was quiet for a moment, processing it all. Then an idea began to take shape. You said he's waiting for you at the clinic right now? He asked. When Juliana nodded, he continued. Then here's what we'll do. You go alone, as planned. I'll go home and pretend I don't know a thing. Tomorrow I'll find out about the trip and show up at the airport, not to stop it, but to support it. He'll be furious, Juliana warned, but there was hope in her voice. At first, yes, Ricardo agreed, But once he's in Houston, once treatment starts, it'll be too late to back out. And I'll be there. Not as the son who forces his father to accept help, but as the son who supports the decision he made. It's a subtle difference, but it matters to his pride. Juliana kissed him then, a kiss wet with tears but full of love and gratitude. When they parted, she touched his face with a tenderness that squeezed his heart. How did you even come up with this? The disguise, the Uber, all of it? Ricardo gave a sheepish smile. I thought you were cheating. The mysterious outings, the hospital smell I assume was another man's cologne, the hidden calls. I created the driver account weeks ago, waiting for the right moment to find out the truth. I never imagined the truth would be this. We're a pair of idiots, Juliana said, laughing and crying at the same time. Me trying to protect you and you trying to catch me in an affair that didn't exist. 15 years of marriage and we still haven't learned to just talk. Ricardo glanced at the dashboard clock. It was 6:40. You need to go, he said. My dad must be worried. I'll drive you the rest of the way, then grab another rideshare home. I'll keep my car in the garage so nothing looks off. The June sun streamed softly through the window of the recovery house in Houston, lighting up Arnaldo Mendez's face as he finished his physical therapy session. At 72, the man who had been handed a death sentence 6 months earlier was now walking with steady steps, his body responding miraculously well to the experimental treatment. The doctors used words like exceptional remission and better than expected response, but for the Mendez family, the right word was simply miracle. Ricardo watched from the doorway, as he did every morning since he had discovered his father's treatment, and decided to temporarily relocate the whole family to Houston. Mendez Construction was being run remotely, with his partner handling day-to-day operations while Ricardo focused on what truly mattered. Juliana had picked up a few architecture projects for Brazilians living in Texas, keeping busy and helping with expenses. The kids, Caio and Marina, had adapted surprisingly well to the international school, their English improving every day. Are you going to stand there watching me or come in and have coffee with your old man? Arnaldo said without turning, that playful tone missing during the worst of treatment, now fully restored. The relationship between father and son had changed fundamentally in those 6 months. The walls of pride that had always stood between them had been replaced by honest vulnerability, a willingness to show love without fear of seeming weak. I was just admiring the medical miracle, Ricardo replied, stepping into the room and taking the armchair beside the bed where his father now rested after the exercises. The doctors said your tumor markers dropped another 15% this week. If it keeps up, in 3 months you could be completely clear. Arnaldo took his son's hand, an act that would once have been unthinkable for the two stubborn men. I know what Juliana did, he said softly. I know the sacrifice you two made. $2.8 million isn't pocket change, even for you. Dad, we've already talked about this, Ricardo began, but Arnaldo cut him off with a gesture. Let me speak, the old man said, eyes misting. I spent my whole life thinking love meant never being a burden to anyone, meant handling everything myself, never asking for help. But in these 6 months, seeing you and Juliana here every day, watching my grandkids grow up speaking English with a Texas twang, watching you spend a fortune to keep this stubborn old man alive, I realized true love is letting yourself be loved. It's accepting help. It's understanding we're not islands. Tears ran freely down Ricardo's face, without any shame. So much had changed in 6 months. Not just his father's miraculous recovery, but the transformation of all of them as a family. Juliana came into the room just then, carrying a tray with a full Brazilian-style breakfast. Brazilian cheese bread, pão de queijo, she'd learned to make, pour over coffee, fresh fruit. "What are my 2 favorite men talking about?" she asked, kissing Arnaldo's forehead and then Ricardo's lips. The bond between father-in-law and daughter-in-law had deepened even more during treatment. Arnaldo called her "daughter of my heart," and never tired of saying Ricardo had hit the jackpot marrying her. "About how lucky an old man I am," Arnaldo replied, taking the cup of coffee. "And about how terrible you two are at lying. I still don't believe Ricardo just found out about my trip on the day at the airport. Do you think I was born yesterday?" Ricardo and Juliana exchanged a conspiratorial look and burst out laughing. Some secrets are meant to be kept, not out of fear or pride, but out of love. The rideshare driver disguise, the trip that changed everything, the discovery in the back seat of the Mercedes. Those memories belong to them alone, proof that even the strongest marriages need moments of rupture and rebuilding. "Grandpa! Grandpa, look what I drew!" Marina ran into the room, with Caio right behind her. The kids had made a habit of visiting their grandfather every morning before school, filling the room with life and joy. Marina proudly showed a drawing of the family, everyone holding hands in front of the hospital with a colorful rainbow over their heads. "It's beautiful, my princess," Arnaldo said, pulling his granddaughter into a hug. "You know what Grandpa has learned all these months here?" Marina shook her head, her eyes curious. "That family isn't about blood or last names. It's about choosing to stay together when everything feels like it's falling apart. It's about your mom hiding my medical appointments to protect your dad. It's about your dad pretending not to know to protect my pride. It's about you two moving to another country to stay close to your grumpy old grandpa." Caio, older and more aware of the situation, hugged his grandfather from the other side. "You're not grumpy, Grandpa. You're the bravest guy I know. And when I grow up, I want to be as stubborn as you and Dad, but also as smart as Mom, to know when to be stubborn and when to accept help." Ricardo looked at his family gathered in that hospital room in Houston, so far from Los Angeles, yet so close to everything that really mattered. He thought of that November afternoon 6 months earlier, when he put on a cap and sunglasses and decided to find out if he was being cheated on. Little did he know he'd discover something much bigger, that true love sometimes disguises itself as a secret, that protection sometimes looks like betrayal, and that the greatest truths of a marriage are often revealed not in planned conversations, but in involuntary confessions in the backseat of a car. "You know what's most ironic about all this?" Juliana said, perching on the arm of Ricardo's chair and running her hand through his hair. "If you hadn't created that driver account, if you hadn't followed me, we might never have had that conversation. I'd have kept hiding it. You'd have kept suspecting. And Mr. Arnaldo might never have accepted your support during treatment." "It was destiny," Arnaldo said solemnly. Then, with the mischievous glint in his eyes that had returned along with his health, he added, "Or maybe it's just that my son is a terrible detective, and my daughter-in-law is a terrible liar. Either way, it worked out in the end." As the family laughed together in that hospital room, the Houston sun kept shining, promising another day of recovery, of healing, of rebuilding. Not just of Arnaldo's body, but of the bonds that tied that family together, bonds tested by secrecy, stretched by distrust, but ultimately unbreakable. Ricardo squeezed Juliana's hand, remembering that moment at the gas station when he took off the disguise and their worlds collided. Back then, it felt like the end of everything. Now, 6 months later, he understood it had only been the beginning. The beginning of a new phase of their marriage, built on absolute truth. The beginning of a new relationship with his father, built on mutual vulnerability. The beginning of a new understanding of what loving someone really means, sometimes protecting, sometimes confronting, but always, always choosing to stay. "Hey, Ricky," Juliana whispered in his ear, using the nickname that had returned after years away. "I love you. Thank you for following me that day." Ricardo smiled, kissing her hand. "Thank you for hiding the truth so badly that you gave me the chance to discover what really matters." And so, in that hospital room thousands of miles from home, the Mendes family celebrated not only victory over cancer, but an even greater victory: love over pride, truth over secrecy, unity over any adversity. Because in the end, as Mr. Arnaldo had learned the hard way, the real miracle wasn't the $500,000 experimental treatment, but the fact that there were people willing to pay any price, keep any secret, tell any lie, just to keep the person they love alive. And if that isn't true love, then nothing is.